And then just after that one, there's a new pole there with a brownish color now. So what happened here was the park at about 2 months ago on a Saturday around about lunchtime started experiencing a power failure. And then they started doing fault finding, and then eventually they called the Eskom office out because it was a permanent fault. The line was out. There are two ways. Some of you that knows that if your electricity trips in your house, it's quite often your main trip switch, your breaker that trips. And if you reset it and it goes on, then it means it wasn't a permanent fault. But if it keeps on tripping, then it means there's a permanent fault. In other words, there's a path from Earth to the live point, which was in this case the thing. So the Eskom office then came and inspected the line. And when they came here, it was a rainy day, it was a drizzling day. They then found that pole, that brown one, was leaning over completely. It was broken, it was lying on the side, and there were a giraffe, there was a rhino lying there, and they were busy feeding, these animals were feeding on these carcasses. And then they called the park rangers to come and assist them to chase the lions away so they can restore the power. So together with the park, they secured the site, and then they replaced that pole, as you can see it there, just to restore the power. That's normally what happens in an emergency. They would, first of all, first course would be to restore the power, which they then did. They put in a new pole there. They fixed this first pole that you see, those two single ones. The conductor was broken, lying on the ground, and then the power was restored. So then we started with what we normally do as a formal investigation. We would come out and we would now, like a typical CI case, try to connect the dots in terms of what happened. So Constant, myself and the park rangers came out, and we then analyzed this whole incident. And it's quite a long story, but what very interesting, there were two giraffes lying. The one on the right hand side of the pole, if you look down towards the valley, there was another one just next to that pole, dead. Then there was the carcass of the rhinoceros. And then there were 2 lions and 3 hyenas. The 2 vultures were afterwards that collided, secondary impacts, while they were circling the area. And we had to determine what was the problem of that. Now, interestingly, when we do such an investigation, you look at all your factors surrounding the site. So you look at the age of the carcass, so which started off the process. So basically, based on that, we also constantly mentioned that we looked at the pole. Why did the pole break? Was it because of wind? Was it an animal that ruptured? What were the problems? We look at the age of the pole. We measure the exact distances of the carcasses from the structure. We measured the vertical height of the line to determine whether it was a giraffe or whatever, because what led to the main incident. So based on all this information, we concluded that the first incident happened when the first giraffe in fact, the line was pushed over by an elephant. And why did we conclude it was an elephant? Because of the height Constant mentioned now. There were rub marks up at the top, brown mud still around the pole. So what happened was an elephant pushed the pole to lean over and to break. As it broke, the line then basically, the clearance was reduced, and the bottom conductors were hanging at about our level currently. So now you can imagine if you take that pole out, the whole line, that section of that span, and there's a dip here. If you can look at the way as well, there you'll see there's a depression in the landscape, resulting in the clearance going from 8 meters to 1.5 meters. So the first that we said was, the first giraffe walked underneath, got electrocuted, and died on the other side. Then the scavengers started moving in and fed on that giraffe. But at that stage, the lion was still alive because there was not a permanent fault. The lion was not on the ground. So then that was the first incident that occurred. Then the second, and why I say that was the first incident because of two things. The age of the carcass. The carcass was completely cleaned by the scavengers. And then the second giraffe afterwards came from the right and walked into the line, fell underneath the line. And then the scavengers also started moving on that. And at that stage, bear in mind, the one giraffe was on the other side, which was in a depression. So most of the scavengers were concentrated around that area. But when the second giraffe, which is just a bit upward, got electrocuted, all the scavengers concentrated around that area where that conductor was now hanging at a very low level. And then you had the lion electrocuted as they walked past. But now the lion would now not trip because it's not a permanent fault. You'll touch the conductor, you'll get electrocuted, it'll fall to the ground. So you quite often see in your car that it makes a dip. So what happens is there's an auto recloser on the system that basically detects whether there's a fault on the line. So if there's a fault, it will disconnect the power and auto reclose if it's not power. So if I touch the conductor, I get electrocuted, goes down, it then determines the settings of the protection to then reclose the system to have the energy restored. So that animal got electrocuted and then the line was restored. So there you have one line, a second line, another, what was the other thing that was also hyena, yeah. And then you had the 3 hyenas. And that's how all those animals got electrocuted. And the final event was when the rhino passed by, touched that conductor, physically breaking the conductor because he walked into the line and got trapped under his head, and he got electrocuted and he fell down, and that broke the conductor, which then resulted in the conductor falling to the ground, causing a permanent fault and to bring the line out. So that's the long and the short. But now interestingly, you know, we now went through a couple of presentations. It's very interesting lessons learned that whenever you've got a site like that is to get people on the site quickly, to capture the as-is evidence. So when we were here, we interviewed the people and we asked them, tell us what you saw when you got here, without intervening and cross-questioning them. And it's very interestingly, some of the local rangers that were with us, how they contributed to the investigation by giving us local knowledge. Like for instance, the one guy, we were standing next to the wrapping pole and he said, but the sand from the excavation is not the same texture as the sand in the pole that broke. So, you know, things like that, small things. Another interesting observation was where the rhino was lying, there was a white tracer line where the grass was burnt, which are important evidence because it showed you that when that line fell to the ground, it basically burned the grass. And also, so a lot of things. There was also a tree just on to the left of that brown pole that you could see that they had burn marks on it. So the conductor was hanging there and it was touched. When it touched it, it burned, physically burned the leaves. But because it wasn't permanent, the recloser came in. So after all, we then recommended that we re-inspect this whole line to look at all the clearances and that we also look at the protection settings within the park to set them at a different level, more focusing on protecting the animals, because your customer services would be affected by that now, because the line will now come out quicker than under normal circumstances, so that you don't have these multiple. But now that will result in a line, your power might go off more often, because your sensitivity settings for this site, they've decided let's consider increasing them to prevent an incident like that. And we've got a meeting with the Parks Board tomorrow, Constance and myself and the management team here locally, to give them feedback on what were the plan that we agreed on. But we also use this to look at, you know, you'll see some of these poles are very old. These lines are over 30 years old. Can we not look at this to look at refurbishing these lines and try to look at alternative ways? Constance now mentioned the research. The research came up with a grating box